South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago has addressed the 105th Annual General Meeting, highlighting global economy's resilience in 2025, despite high U.S. tariffs and geopolitical shocks. Now, the IMF has raised its growth forecast 3%, though risks remain. South Africa's growth is projected near 1%, held back by structural challenges, but supported by reforms and lower interest rates. Inflation stable at about 3%, with a slight temporary rise expected. Here are some excerpts.
Received a yellow laminated card on registration. This card must be raised for identification purposes when shareholders wishes to comment or ask a question at this meeting. Likewise, any shareholder attending this AGM online who holds 200 or more shares in the Sarb and who is entitled to vote in accordance with the provisions of the Sarb Act and its regulations should vote in accordance with the instructions as outlined in the notice. Shareholders are eligible to ask written questions related to the business of the meeting by selecting the messaging icon and typing their message in the chat box at the bottom of the messaging screen. Messages can be submitted at any time before a matter is put to the vote. Shareholders attending remotely can also participate and ask questions using the virtual microphone option. In this case, you will be required to dial into an operator using the number provided in your access email. The operator will verify the eligibility of the shareholders. Once I invite a shareholder to ask a verbal question, the operator will unmute the shareholder. Shareholders will be able to continue listening to the meeting while in the queue to ask a verbal question. Shareholders' questions will be answered during the meeting, and both the questions and the answers will be recorded in the minutes. However, should questions from shareholders be received after the closing of the poll and question time, they will be responded to directly via email. Please allow me to introduce my colleagues who are joining us to respond to any questions that the shareholders may have. They are the Secretary of the Sarb, Ms. Zweli Swatkopiso. To her left is the Chairperson of the Audit Committee, Mr. Norman Mbazima. To his left is the Chairperson of the Remuneration Committee, Dr. Yvonne Muthian. And to her left is the Chairperson of the Board of Risk and Ethics Committee, Mr. Zoib Hussein. And the Chairperson of the Non-Executive Directors Committee, Ms. Lerato Mulibazi, at the far left. It is surprising that growth has held up this well and that forecasts are moving up rather than down. That said, there are not many reasons to feel safe. In the United States, businesses have front-loaded imports, and many have been in a wait-and-see mode as a way of dealing with tariff uncertainty. It is now increasingly clear that tariffs will settle at higher rates. The Yale Budget Lab calculates the effective tariff as of August at 18.3%, the highest since 1934. This implies significant price pressures that will have to be absorbed somewhere in the system. In this context, it is unsurprising that the US Federal Reserve has been keeping policy rates on hold, with the stance still somewhat on the restrictive side. In other regions, it has been clearer that trade disruptions are not causing significant inflationary pressure. The main concern has been that supply chain disruptions would push up prices, seeing as most other countries have taken an enlightened approach and refrained from raising their own tariffs to match US measures. As the year has developed, what we have seen is mostly modest disinflationary effects, stemming from weaker demand and excess capacity. A weaker dollar has also been supportive of other countries, especially emerging markets. This has given many central banks the scope to ease policy rates and adopt more neutral policy stances. In South Africa, our preliminary assessment is that tariffs and other uncertainties in the global economy are causing modest damage to growth while leaving inflation broadly unchanged. The US is a large trading partner for South Africa, but it is not as important as Europe, China, or the Southern African Development Community. Our exports to the US mostly consist of commodities, some of which are exempted, and manufactured products such as cars. Some parts of the agricultural sector are exposed, but total agricultural exports are only about 3% of our total exports to the US. In our latest forecast round, we factored in a higher tariff rate. This moved our growth projection for the year down by about 0.1 percentage point. While this is a setback, it is not catastrophic. Unfortunately, our growth rate for the year is still looking low, close to 1%. This continues a stagnation trend that has been in place for roughly a decade. The economy grew at about 4% a year during the 2000s. It then slowed down steadily during the first half of the 2010s and has hovered at growth rates of about 1% ever since. As we have said repeatedly in our monetary policy statements, the drivers of weak growth are mainly structural and require structural reforms. Put in plainer language, without economic jargon, we need trains to run and the cities to function. Given the reform momentum underway, which is best illustrated by improved electricity availability, we see some scope for better growth in the coming years. We also believe National Treasury's efforts to stabilize debt can bolster confidence. In addition, the economy is enjoying some support from lower interest rates, with the yield curve shifting lower over the past year or so, and our policy rate down by 125 basis points since September 2024.